It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. Wow, my discussion last week of the 50-year mortgage brought more comments from people than at any show I've done in a very long time. And first of all, I appreciate it. I appreciate folks listening, reaching out to me with thoughts, comments. I've received a number of really interesting ideas. I'm going to share a couple of those on the show today. I want to continue this discussion about affordability and housing and such, etc., and maybe some solutions. I know there's an opportunity here. I'm blessed. The show does air coast to coast. We're on over 25 stations nationally. And although we're not the biggest show by any means, over the years, there's been a number of occasions where I've brought up a thought or an idea. I start hearing this on some of the national shows in the media. I'll hear a politician or bureaucrat start discussing that idea, and oftentimes I haven't heard anywhere else. So I've even tested this. I know in the past I've said, look, I don't care who gets the credit as long as good stuff comes about. To a large degree, I do adhere to that, but it would be nice to get a little recognition sometimes. So, hey, if you hear some of the ideas on this show and you're listening and you want to run with it and maybe even learn more about it or dive in it in more depth, please reach out to me at yourpersonalbank.com. Because I think some of the ideas that I come up with and share, and by the way, they're not all just my ideas. If you want to know the secret, yes, I do a lot of research. The secret sauce, if you will, to this show and sharing the ideas that I do on a weekly basis come from the everyday folks, everyday Americans that I deal with literally on a daily basis. My show airs coast to coast. People reach out to me to discuss financial situations, goals, and I have all types of clients from every age imaginable, 18 to 80 plus, all types of income brackets, types of businesses, careers. It's a vast cross-section of America. And I really enjoy it. I learn a lot of things from folks. I have clients who have literally been one of the original engineering teams with Elon Musk and Tesla. I have people who are clients that are in the IT industry right now as we speak, and they share with me information that you probably don't hear anywhere else, and they're dealing with it personally. So whether it's a business owner or a career person, and whether they're in Washington or Florida or Boston or California or anywhere in between, I've probably had a discussion with somebody in or related to that field in the recent past. And many of my clients that I actively deal with on many year basis, some even decades. So I understand I'm blessed. I'm in rather a unique situation, and I get some tremendous ideas and feedback from people throughout the country on a weekly basis. And it's a blessing I don't take lightly. So we're going to share some more, what I believe to be tremendous, up-to-date, current information that's affecting folks, everyday Americans, today as we speak. So the reason why the 50-year mortgage has caused such a firestorm is because of the cause of it and then the solutions. Now, first of all, this was according to Smart Asset. The income that a family needs to live comfortably in every U.S. state varies from the low of $178,000 in Alabama to a high of $301,000 in Massachusetts. They define a family as a family of four, husband, wife, two kids. And their definition of living comfortably puts that income level in that state at about the top 20%. And this is why so many people today who are not making $200,000 and $300,000 a year in their household are feeling at least some levels of financial stress. Much of this has been caused by government spending, low interest rate environment for far too long, which created an asset bubble in the real estate and stock markets. Also, government spending has really put us in a position where we've spent our rainy day funds in sunny weather. Both top economists and historians are uniting to urge action on the $38 trillion now of federal debt that we have. It's about 120% of annual economic output, or GDP. gross domestic product. These are levels that have never been seen outside of periods of time like in late World War II, where we as a country spent a lot of money fighting the war. This level of spending is typically only done in true emergencies, like a World War II, for example. Yet we've done it in a time where it really wasn't necessary at all to spend that kind of money. We spent rainy day funds in the sunny period, and that causes problems. That causes issues like a housing crisis that we have now. And normally I don't look to government for solutions. The problem we have, though, this time is largely the government has contributed to the problem or even caused the problem. So it serves rightly the government should be at least a part of the solution. So not only has excess government spending, low interest rates created this asset bubble and housing crisis, but some other factors have contributed to this as well. And that is why we're hearing from more and more people stating we need some type of big, bold, audacious plan to help tackle America's housing crisis. A Marshal Plan, even, if you will. Now, the causes of the excess spending, low interest rates, have created a situation of where part of the American dream, homeownership, has been deferred or delayed. The median age of all homebuyers now is 59. And do you know that in 1981, it was 29? Now, some of the ideas that are being promoted are good, and some of them are really, really bad. And one of those recently that came about was the 50-year mortgage. Now, the argument in favor was allowing a longer-term mortgage would allow payments to be at least somewhat lower than, say, a 30-year mortgage. Well, it turns out on the typical amount borrowed, the difference is only a few $100s a month. And some would argue, well, that few $100s a month could make the difference. Well, here's the part I believe that most people are missing. There are a lot of other problems with the 50-year mortgage, but here's where the one benefit of it, and I think everyone would agree, that it would allow somebody that maybe couldn't qualify for the 30-year could qualify for the 50 because of the lower payments. Well, that lower payment is largely going to be wiped out by the higher interest rate that the mortgage companies or the lenders would likely charge. And we all know this, that typically a 30-year mortgage is about a half a point interest higher than a 15-year mortgage. Why? It's more risk to the lender. They have to commit that money or lend that money out over a longer period of time. By doing that, they get rewarded by receiving a higher interest rate. So all the models that I've seen, like I said, have assumed the same interest rate between a 30 and a 50-year mortgage. And frankly, that is just very unrealistic. So we can argue and discuss and bandy about the idea of whether a 50-year mortgage is a worthwhile thing or all the problems involved with it. But my point is quite simple. The one and only benefit will largely be wiped out by the higher interest rate. Therefore, the 50-year mortgage, with let's assume a 0.5% higher rate than a 30-year would have been, the difference in the payment would be largely wiped out by the difference. Therefore, the benefit of the 50-year is wiped out. So why in the world are we even talking about it? And I think that's the best way to look at and consider the 50-year mortgage. And if you were to legislate it, let's say, well, lenders wouldn't want to offer it, and then you would have to offer some kind of incentives, which mean probably government money that would have to go into it, which means taxpayers would have to support it with subsidies or some type of bonuses to the lender, which means we get involved in getting people committed to longer-term mortgages, which means they're in debt for a longer period of time. They pay a whole lot more interest. If the value of the property drops even a little bit and they had to sell, for example, a 50-year mortgage, typically if you've made payments for a decade, and let's say you had to sell for some reason, paid down about 5% principal on that loan, and if you're more than 5% underwater, well, that whole decade of payments just went out the window. You just lost it. So again, the benefits of the longer-term mortgage are so minimal and probably be wiped out by a higher interest rate, or would have to be financed or encouraged or funded by, say, taxpayers or some other method. It's just, in my opinion, just not worth it. And I know people don't want to hear this, but if somebody can't really afford a 30-year mortgage, they certainly shouldn't be looking at a 50-year. Why commit? I mean, if you could barely qualify for the 50-year and you committed yourself to that time frame, life happens, stuff happens. And I had heard some discussions from folks, well, it would allow them to get into the property value or allow them to get into purchase a property, and then they could benefit from the appreciation of the property. Okay, that's a valid point, but there is no guarantee that property value would go up, particularly in the time frame, let's say in the next decade, that first decade, where maybe they had to sell and they got themselves underwater. Why do I say that? Well, it's really quite simple. That since 2012, over half of U.S. homes have lost value in the United States. In fact, the average value drop in the country is about 9.7%. Now, it's mostly concentrated in the West and the South, but assuming, let's just use an example, somebody took a 50-year mortgage, purchased at the top or a bad time, right? And then property values over the next few years dropped nearly 10% in their market, in their city, whatever, and they were forced to sell. And even if they've been paying payments for 10 years or you only knocked down 5% of the equity, depending on what they put down as terms of a down payment, they could easily be underwater. And that's not the kind of situation you want to put people in. Also, in a typical house, they would pay roughly double the amount of interest on a 50-year mortgage versus a 30-year. I just think it's bad all around. It's a really bad idea, and I don't believe it should be pursued. Now, there are some other ideas, though, that are coming about, and that I like. I like the fact that people from all walks of life, both political parties, you name it, are starting to finally realize we've got a real problem here, and we need to do something to solve it. And I don't think it's going to be any one thing in particular that's going to completely solve it. I think it'll be a series of different policies or decisions or actions that will occur to solve the housing affordability crisis that we currently have now. So I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment because I'm going to cover some of those things. If you do want to contact me to learn how to navigate this changing economic environment we're clearly in, I believe some volatility is ahead of us before things may hopefully settle down, before the economic situation improves. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com for more information. I can share with you how to grow your money. Unlimited upside, no downside risk, lock in gains. Once you lock in your gains, they're locked in. They become new principal, and you can lock in at any time. Index products is the best time in over 40 years. It's a golden era of fixed assets. So contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Concerned about market risk? I'm Ference Toth, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. The S&P 500 valuations are higher than at any time ever recorded in stock market history. This includes 1929 and 1999. We all know what happened afterwards. It wasn't pretty. Elevated valuations increase risk to the downside. Annuities and Your Personal Bank offer unlimited upside with no downside market risk. Your principal is guaranteed. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com to maximize returns, reduce market risk, increase liquidity, and reduce taxes.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. So there's been several ideas that are starting to get thrown out there in terms of helping with housing affordability. Now, one of the ideas I heard, if this could get implemented, I think it would be an awesome idea, is it revolves around property taxes. Now, property taxes are something that I find to be quite unfair in terms of, particularly if somebody's owned a property and they've owned it for a long period of time, it feels like you're renting. You never really own it, if you know what I'm trying to say. Because even if you paid it off, you still got to pay a government agency amount of money to stay there. That just feels deeply unfair. Yet, on the other side of the coin, I understand, infrastructure has to be paid for somehow. So how do you address it and make it most fair? Well, going back in history a little bit teaches us a lesson. We can learn a lot from, our founders and things like that. Well, it turns out when the founders were here and for much of, say, the 1800s and such, property taxes did exist. Founders were actually okay with them, but they were done differently than they are today for the most part. And property taxes were assessed on the value of the property itself only, not the improvements. Now, this has some significant benefits to it. Your property taxes would not increase as a result of you improving the land. Now, this serves a tremendous benefit. It discourages speculators of purchasing the land, holding on to it, waiting for that land to increase in value before selling it, which means that land just sits there empty while they're waiting for the appreciation of the value of the property. Well, if you owned a property and you improved upon it and your property taxes weren't going to go up as a result, it would encourage more improvement. The thing is about taxes is you want to tax the things that you want to discourage and not tax the things that you want to encourage. Great example is smoking. Governments tax cigarettes because they're trying to discourage people from smoking because smokers have more health issues, more health costs. Some of that goes onto the governments and healthcare costs and things like that. Well, if we have a housing crisis, what do you want to do? You want to encourage development of the property. You want to build houses, for example, living space. And that's one way to not discourage good behavior. You want to encourage good behavior, right? Of course, it would have to be passed by a number of states, but I think if that idea got out there and started to spread, we're seeing a lot of discussions out of Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, about property taxes. I think if a good idea took hold, and one state did it, many others would follow. So it could be quite the domino effect. Another good idea I'm seeing here is there's a bipartisan plan now. It's aiming to make American Dream affordable again for millions of first-time home buyers. And the idea behind this one is there is a federal government program. It's called the Home Investments Partnership Program, and it provides grants to state and local jurisdictions to build affordable housing. Now, for the most part, this program has targeted multifamily housing. But the argument is that's not the American dream. The American dream is not to rent an apartment. It is to own a single-family home. And what they're looking to do is change the focus of this program to give grants to states and and communities the ability to rehab structures, build new homes, but make the focus much more on single-family homes. This could reduce the cost of the infrastructure and all that. And I applaud that effort. Look, if we're going to, these are taxpayer dollars, obviously. I'm against any excess spending of taxpayer dollars. But if money's going to get spent, I'd rather it be spent on something that would help citizens, help Americans, help them accomplish their American dream rather than being a detriment. Again, the American dream is not to rent an apartment. It's to own a single-family home. I've seen other efforts focused on reducing the costs of building a home. And this I applaud also because the infrastructure costs, when you talk about permitting and et cetera, can run upwards of about 25% costs of the average home. Well, the average home in America is a little over $400,000. That means around $100,000 of that cost is just in permits and infrastructure costs. Gosh, if that could be cut in half, let's say, well, you just cut the average cost of the average home by $50,000. Well, that would have a significant impact on building new homes. Because as I stated last week, the housing crisis, the high cost of homes, is really simply a supply problem. We have a situation of where we have too many people in this country. A lot of it has been caused by immigration, both legal and illegal, and we haven't built enough homes. And those two combinations have really created the problem we have. Going back to the 50-year mortgage or even any type of mortgage, trying to get into a home that you can barely afford can cause many problems. I know there was a lot of folks that were buying homes as the prices were going up through the pandemic. Interest rates had gone up, and the idea was, well, we'll buy the home at the higher interest rate, and then later refinance when interest rates went down. Because everybody at that time was saying, oh, interest rates will go down, interest rates will go down. Well, they haven't really. They've gone down a little, but not a whole lot. So for one thing, I don't recommend that because you can't predict or guarantee that the rates are going to go. You don't have any control over that. You don't have any control over the rates going up or down. So if you're really pushing or you're stretching to get into that home and can barely afford it or even need in the next few years for something to change, like rates to go down, you're counting on something you cannot control. And it turns out we're running into a significant amount of that. It turns out in October of 2025, the rejection rate for credit applications exploded to almost half. And the big reason behind it was interest rates. The Fed had dropped rates a couple of times. Interest rates, mortgage rates had dropped about a point from around 7 to about 6 if you had good credit. So a lot of people who bought a couple, 3 years ago at the peak of the pandemic housing buying spree probably paid too much, frankly, took on a loan that was they probably stretched themselves, and now they saw an opportunity to refinance at a little bit lower rate to give themselves some breathing room. Well, almost half of them got rejected. Why? The most likely reason is they overpaid, and the prices of a lot of these homes are going down. As I stated earlier, we're seeing an approximate 10% drop in the South and the West on average from the highs, so they don't have any equity. So now the interest rates have gone down a little bit, which is what they needed, and they can't qualify because they paid too much and they extended themselves too much. This is a basic financial literacy point that people need to understand. And again, financial literacy is not very common. But if you qualify for a loan, let me use an example. Let's say you qualify for a $500,000 loan. Well, what do most people do? Well, now they go look for a home that's about $500,000. And the reality is you should give yourself some wiggle room. I know people don't want to hear this, but this is the reality. This is smart, intelligent financial literacy. If you qualify for a $500,000 home, you shouldn't be looking for anything more than $400,000. Why? You should give yourself about a 20% wiggle room. Why is this so significant? If you qualified for that $500,000 home, what is the lender telling you? They're telling you that is the maximum amount they're willing to lend to you. Anything above that amount is just too risky. Should you push that envelope? Should you get up to, at, or as close to that as you can, which is, again, what most people do? They think, oh, gosh, the bank approved me for $500,000. That means I can spend that. No, you should know that is the point. That's the highest point of risk before it just becomes too risky and the lender won't lend to you. And if anything goes wrong, you have a hiccup in your income, and you don't have much in the way of reserves, you're just asking for financial stress, challenges, and even sometimes catastrophe. The simplest and easiest way to eliminate financial stress is live below your means. It's not easier said than done, I understand, but this is something that you have to do. You want to live a relatively stress-free life financially? Live below your means. Have extra every month and build up a nice nest egg. Over time, eventually you could then afford something bigger or nicer or more expensive. And one of the other key financial literacy ideas with this is if you do get an increase in income, get a raise, whatever, most people go out and buy something or get a nicer car or house or whatever it may be. The smart thing to do is live in the same, you lived previously at a certain income level. You spent a certain amount of money and now you've got an increase in income. That's great. Delay the increase in spending. Defer that. Wait 6 months, a year even. To live within your means or below your means, you will then have more in the future and you will have less stress. It's really just that simple. Now, one of the last key points in housing values, I should say, is a lot of people are asking me, what do they think is going to happen if we are in an AI bubble and the markets correct or even crash? How is that going to affect the value of real estate? The reality is it will affect it to some degree, but not as large as what we saw in 08-09, most likely. In fact, if you go previous downturns, the 08-09 downturn was actually caused by real estate, then followed by the stock market. Pretty much all the other downturns, if you look back over the last number of decades, were typically led by the stock market, and then there was some adjustment to the real estate market, but not significantly unless you saw a reduction of jobs. If the unemployment rate goes up significantly, that's what affects housing prices and housing values. There's two major things that are impacting unemployment. Unless things change significantly, or probably it's going to get worse. One of those is AI. AI has been touted as a technology that will likely replace a lot of jobs. If indeed it does, then we could see a impact to housing prices. Because if somebody's in a home and they lose their job and they can't make the payment, they've got to sell, don't they? And that'll have a downward pressure on housing prices. And the other reason, and I catch a lot of feedback on this, some of it, not all of it positive, by the way, is immigration, both legal and illegal. Now, I'm going to discuss in the next segments more about this, and I think I'm going to flush this out a little bit more because I think people need to understand the impact that this will likely have, and is having right now, on our economy and on our money. As I stated before, I believe we are in a period of change which creates a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty. And if you want to move forward, ensure you can have unlimited upside gains with no downside risk. You can lock in those gains, and once you do, they become the new principal, and you can lock in those gains at any time. You need to contact me at yourpersonalbank.com for more information.
This is Ference, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. My show focuses on creating tax-free buckets of money, insured, guaranteed, highly liquid, and the ability to create positive arbitrage. Did you know this is the best time in over 40 years to invest in index annuities? An index annuity allows you to 1. Grow your money safely without market risk. Once gains are locked in, they're guaranteed against future market loss. 2. Double-digit potential upside on good market years with no losses in bad years. Principal is guaranteed. 3. A 7 to 8% fixed interest option is available in the first year. If you're interested in growing your money with potential index-related gains without downside market risk, this is the best time in over 40 years to consider an annuity. If your annuity is over 2 years old, the newer products likely have far superior potential returns. Please contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or 866-268-4422 for more info. That's yourpersonalbank.com.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, that's yourpersonalbank.com, and yes, you will reach me. You can also go to the Your Personal Bank app, by the way. I tend to forget that, but a lot of my listeners really like listening on the app. You can go to that or the website. Each show has its own title. You can listen to any of the previously recorded shows anytime you want. And I've been getting a lot of feedback, most of it positive, some of it not so much. I'm going to get myself in trouble here, just so you know, but I want you to know I appreciate all the feedback because that gives me better ideas and how people are really thinking out there, to keep it real, if you know what I'm saying. So this is going to be, like I said, this is going to upset some people, but we need to go down this path anyway because it's important to understand and how it affects us. We've been discussing a lot about affordability, housing affordability in particular, but affordability across the board is getting impacted significantly by the fact that we have too many people in this country, and that is both legal and illegal immigration. We've discussed the illegal immigration quite often, and it isn't a bias. I know I had one of the listeners sharing with me thinking, I was sharing my bias against illegal immigration. No, I'm first-generation American myself from my dad's side. I've shared this often that my dad escaped the Soviets from Hungary. He was a political refugee. He literally escaped. He could have lost his life. If he had been caught, he likely would have either been shot or taken to a gulag. I mean, this is serious. He did it the right way. He managed to immigrate as a political refugee to the United States. He met my mom in college. My mom's side of the family is German-Irish. I don't know a lot about the German side other than they came around late 1800s. The Irish side came to the United States in the 1840s, the potato famine, that type of thing. So I have a personal and deep understanding of both sides of the issue, both as a first-generation American on one side and long-time history of Americans on my mom's side of the family. So I can appreciate the challenges of both. But here's the reality. When you talk about immigrants that came, through Ellis Island, for example, 1800s, the Irish side of my family, Irish potato famine, the German side, they came looking for a better life, as all immigrants do. They wanted to come to the land of opportunity. They weren't looking for anything. They weren't given anything. They had, for the most part, had nothing, but came here for the opportunity, worked hard, built a life in this country. My dad's side even, same thing, escaping Hungary, being a political refugee, wasn't given anything except a new opportunity at life. And he deeply appreciated that. And he became a very proud U.S. citizen. And he always wanted to be a part of this country. What we have more recently is a different type of immigrant. Yes, they're coming here for economic opportunities, but in many cases, not wanting to become part of this country. In fact, doing the opposite, taking advantage of the generosity that exists here. And it turns out nearly 60% of illegal alien households use at least one welfare program. This is according to the U.S. government. And who pays for all this? Well, it's the U.S. taxpayer. We pay for all this. And some of these ICE raids that we've been seeing, they've been ramping up in different cities, most recently Charlotte, North Carolina, have really brought to light how big of an issue this is. Our property taxes are funding free education for illegal immigrants. Our classroom sizes have exploded. Kids' teachers spend a large percentage of their day using translator apps to talk to students who can't even speak English. This is degrading the value of education for our own children. And it's also impacting the affordability, whether it be groceries or housing. Recently, the Charlotte ICE operations have caused literally hundreds of construction sites across the city that are typically bustling with workers are now quiet. They've actually stopped. And some people are complaining about this, but I have to admit, I'm a capitalist. I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned several businesses myself personally. But if a business is profiting off the violation of our laws, I don't have any sympathy for that. In Charlotte, their school system announced that over 20,000 students didn't appear or not attending school because they're afraid of ICE deportations. Two of their elementary schools officially reported 2/3 of their student body did not come to school. The estimates have come out that in the Charlotte, a city of about 900,000 people, that upwards of 150,000 of those are illegal immigrants, that over 15% of your total population have broken the law to be there and have no legal right to be there, and obviously are using government services, where schools, transportation, housing, nearly 60% of those are on government benefits, whether it's food stamps, government housing, or other benefits that the taxpayer is paying for. We're driving up the cost of our own food and housing, and we're the ones paying for it for people that should not be here. And you start to wonder why people are getting pissed off, and rightly so. A New York Times article recently stated half of immigrants feel less safe under Trump. Well, that is actually good in my opinion. That means half of illegal aliens are finally realizing that breaking into our country has consequences. The article pointed out that 40% are reporting anxiety and depression from deportation fears. Folks, that's called accountability. And many are now skipping doctor visits and food stamps. Well, if they didn't come here illegally, they wouldn't have this problem, would they? The article also pointed out that 1 in 5 illegals personally know someone detained or deported. My wife said this to me. She goes, she kind of felt bad for them. And I understand the sentiment. As she pointed out, she goes, they were basically invited to come here. I said, I understand. I agree. The Biden administration, for the most part, opened the doors. We had rampant illegal immigration. Our borders were wide open. And they did all but, roll out the red carpet. I mean, they literally flew. You could go on an app and get a flight and fly in as an illegal into this country. Free flights. I understand why the people came. They were basically invited. But as I pointed out to her, they have now been disinvited. There's an app you can go to now. It's the same app, I believe, where you can book a flight that we, the taxpayers, pay for to fly you back to your home country and pay you $1,000 when you land. So you have now officially been disinvited. It's like when somebody comes to a party and you invited them, and then the party's over and they're hanging around and they don't seem to leave, and you're trying to give them the hint, finally tell them to leave, and they refuse to do so. I mean, that's where we're at right now. And it's causing real economic damage and harm to many citizens of our country. But here's the part that bothers me. In the same article, this New York Times article, it stated most illegals say they're going to stay no matter what, so their kids will have a better lives. So they're basically saying to us, screw your laws, America, we're keeping the benefits anyway. And that is entitlement that is completely and totally undeserved. Look, I know most of them are nice people, and they came for a better life. But you know, there's a right way to do it. Just because I invited you to my home for a party doesn't give you the right to steal something from my home and take it for yourself. And that's what they're doing by saying, we're not leaving. And that's where it's wrong. Now, as bad as the illegal immigration portion of things are, and again, I feel for a lot of these people. I understand why they came, but they need to go. They didn't do it. If your first act coming into a country is breaking its laws, from a character standpoint, probably not the kind of person you want in your country anyway. We're a generous country. We invite more immigrants into our country than any country in the world. And yes, I understand it takes a long time. It's a pain to go through the process. I get that. But again, it's a privilege, not a right. And just because a lot of people were benefiting from that, and a lot of organizations, non-governmental organizations, and etc., were benefiting from it, doesn't mean it was right. But another issue is coming up that may be just as bad, if not worse, and that is the legal immigration. The Trump administration has been working hard to reshore essential manufacturing. That is good, to rebuild our economy. We should build stuff here, especially if it has national defense implications or things that our citizens need. I mean, the fact that we cannot produce enough antibiotics to support our own population is beyond ridiculous. We should not have to rely on other countries for that, like China. But recently, a lot of concern has come up, and it's come from Trump himself and his administration, where he stated we need to bring in people to teach our folks how to build stuff. Now, I understand, for the most part, I understand there may be some certain expertise that might be required short term to train our people how to build high-tech things. Maybe they haven't before. But it doesn't mean we have to bring people over here to do it. Gosh, we could send our people over there to train. It's one idea. Or it should be something very short-term and very limited, because I just find it rather offensive when the president of our United States doesn't believe in our own people enough to say, hey, we could build high-tech stuff, computer chips, missiles, or whatever else it may be. I mean, first of all, we invented the computer chips and trained other countries to build them. I think Trump has forgotten that. Or, at the very least, he's being influenced by people who have other agendas. And I don't think anyone, again, would have a big issue with H-1B work visas or something like that if it meant a few Taiwanese workers coming to train Americans in a $100 billion chip factory, for example. But currently, HB1 visas make up over 750,000 people. Of about 80% are taking entry-level or junior-level jobs from Americans. And Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, who I have largely agreed with on many things, he's talking about 7-year work visas. See, here's the problem. If you build factories in America, it's supposed to provide jobs for Americans. But if you're just going to build factories here, staff it with a bunch of foreigners, and give them H-1B visas or whatever, and the problem is they generally tend to never leave, well, you just defeated the entire purpose. Now, the employers prefer the work visas because they can be legally paid less than American workers, and secondly, they're more controllable. It's like an indentured servant. Their work visa, their legal ability to be in the United States is based on them having that job. And if they lose that job, they lose the visa and lose the right to live in the United States. Well, those types of employees are obviously going to be far easier to control than, say, a U.S. citizen. But it even gets worse than that, and it has to do with the payroll taxes. And frankly, it's just insulting in general. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment because I'm going to discuss that further. If you want to contact me, I believe, again, we are in some uncertain and volatile times. You want to grow your money, unlimited upside, no downside risk. Once your gains are locked in, they become new principal. Your principal becomes guaranteed, and you can lock in those gains at any time. If you want more information, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com.
This is Ferentz, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. Your Personal Bank is a financial concept that allows you to grow your money insured with guarantees, income tax-free, and highly liquid. Also, you have the potential to continue to earn interest on money you invest in other assets, purchase items, or pay expenses. How can you do this? First, invest in a high cash value policy to earn dividends. If you leave money in the policy, it'll grow like any investment, insured with guarantees and tax-free. Second, we establish a bank line of credit using the cash in the policy as collateral. When you access funds, you receive them from the bank. Typically, dividends earned are higher than the interest charged by the bank. You keep the difference. This is known as positive arbitrage. If you want to earn interest on money you spent or invest elsewhere, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or 866-268-4422 for more info. That's yourpersonalbank.com.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferentz Toth. Want more information? Contact Ferentz at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferentz Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferentz. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. So what's bubbling up as the newest issue is the legal immigration issue. We've discussed from the beginning of the show the affordability crisis that we've been living in, primarily the housing crisis. Well, if you bring in a whole lot of people, they need to live somewhere. We already have a shortage of homes as it is. Not enough homes have been built over the past decade or so. Why would you bring more people in? And then the other argument is AI is supposedly going to replace a lot of jobs, a lot of entry-level jobs in particular, yet you're bringing in, we're bringing in about 1.2 million people a year legally through various work visas, and about 80% of them happen to be entry-level positions. Which is it? Do we need all this extra help, or is AI going to work out? See, the two don't line up, do they? It's one or the other, right? And so why would we I believe robotics is going to replace a lot of these types of jobs for sure. So why would you be bringing in all these excess people when it clearly looks like we're going to be having a shortage of jobs going forward due to advanced technology, whether it's AI or robotics or both? Now, this is becoming a very divisive issue because I understand the push and the pull that the Trump administration is dealing with. He's trying to work with a lot of these countries and big companies and reshoring manufacturing and bringing in all this investment into the country, which is great for our economy. We should build stuff, particularly, like I said before, if it affects our national security. We certainly shouldn't be relying on someone else or another country for it. But I believe he's getting some pressure from those people. Hey, we need to bring in some of our people to quote unquote train Americans on how to build computer chips or missiles or whatever it is they're building. And at the same time, unemployment among younger people is at some of the highest levels we've seen in years. And when Trump says we don't have the expertise, it's kind of insulting. And I guess what I'm getting by that is this. During World War II, housewives were building ships and tanks and airplanes, weren't they? We taught them, trained them. Was that effective? Yeah, we won the war. Or let's use a more current example. We take 18-year-olds and we put them in the Navy and teach them how to run nuclear subs. Do you think that's complicated? Of course it is. So it isn't that our country doesn't have the capability. Maybe we have some people that need the training. But instead of talking about, say, bringing in a few dozen trainers to a chip factory to teach a bunch of Americans how to build high-end computer chips, the administration is talking about hundreds of thousands of people over up to 7-year work visas. And historically, the problem is once they come into the country, these types of things, they never leave. Now, of course, the employers like it because they can be legally paid less. In fact, one of the work visa programs, I think it's called OPT, allows employers to not pay payroll tax. So they're not contributing to Social Security or anything, which means the company can pay less for a foreign worker than they can for a U.S. citizen. Well, how is that fair? How can the U.S. citizen compete when immediately the company gets to save money on taxes? And by the way, the foreign worker will probably work for less because their visa is dependent on the job, which means they're more almost like indentured servants, because if they lose the job or do something to cause them to lose their job, they get kicked. They can't stay anymore. They have to leave. But it even gets worse than that. We've got fraudulent situations going on where Spotify, for example, and others, they have giant job boards that are not linked to their main website, and they're very hidden. Because, see, some of the rules of the H-1B is you have to advertise for a job, and if you can't get an American worker, then you can bring in a foreign one. Well, they're playing games with that. It's been proven. 86% of Amazon entry and junior level positions are foreign workers on various work visas. Microsoft 77% and Google's 55%. You mean to tell me Google, Microsoft, and Amazon couldn't find well over half, upwards of 86% of their workforce in the United States? No, of course they could. They just didn't want to pay them more. Public schools even are using the H-1B program to import English teachers from foreign countries. Now, do you think Americans are qualified to teach English? I mean, come on, give me a break. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 2 million students graduated with bachelors in 2024. Less than half were employed by October. At the same time, we approved over 400,000 H-1B visas. So if 60% of students couldn't find jobs, why are we bringing in 400,000 foreigners to work those jobs? It doesn't make sense. It's not right. It's just not fair. And you wonder why all this is going on. We shared why the businesses want these work visas, because, again, they can save money, hire foreign workers for less, save money on taxes, all of that. Plus, they have more control than a typical U.S. citizen because the work visa is tied to the job, typically. But it has to do with the census, and it has to do with political power. See, not only are legal aliens counted in the census, but so are the 55 million current visa holders in the United States. If they get the right to vote, they overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Now, there's been proven cases of are not citizens voting, but whether they vote or not doesn't matter because they're counted in the census. Provides more seats in the House and more electoral college votes. The vast majority of those 55 million visa holders live in blue states. Is it starting to make sense to you now? It's about political power. From a political standpoint, more House seats, more electoral college votes. And it benefits the large companies who can hire workers for less, get tax breaks, and more control over their employees. People wonder why young white men in particular are starting to radicalize more. See, they've been told their whole lives that they're inherently privileged, yet they're being systematically shut out of education, jobs, and opportunities. Now, this type of disconnect breeds resentment, and folks, it's going to get a whole lot worse soon if it doesn't get corrected. And when they see they're getting shut out of all these opportunities of education and jobs, and they also see that a sizable share of people in their country, we're talking about literally tens of millions, who don't pay for food, rent, health insurance, electricity, and they have to sacrifice just to try to make ends meet, When they lose their patience, it's not going to be pretty. Some people say, well, it'll be a while. I'm not so sure. I think it could happen a lot sooner than many people think. Why do I say that? As I stated at the very beginning of the show today, I talk to people of all ages, young, old, wealthy, not so wealthy, and everything in between. I've got a pulse on America from coast to coast that I believe few have. Insight into what they're thinking, their goals, their dreams, their economic situation, their challenges, and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. And there is a lot of resentment out there, folks, especially with younger people who are feeling left out of opportunities, whether it be education, jobs, being able to buy a home. And they see a lot of people taking advantage of the system and being freeloaders. The best fix is those that are being fraudulent and freeloaders, they need to be out of this country. If they're illegal, that's easy. They need to go. Voluntarily, ideally, and if they won't, involuntarily. And these work visa programs need to be scaled back dramatically, just like are now having to requalify for SNAP for food benefits because there's so much fraud involved with the system. I believe the same thing needs to occur with the entire work visa system. Everybody who has one should have to reapply and should be scrutinized because H-1B1s, for example, are supposed to be, we were told, for geniuses. Well, if you're an entry-level worker at Amazon, that doesn't require a genius. And that person should lose that visa and have to go back home because that's fraudulent. And those opportunities then should be made available for U.S. citizens. If not, it could get ugly really quick. Look, economically, we have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of concern, a lot of volatility ahead, I believe. I'm upbeat about the longer-term future, but some things have to be dealt with, some things have to change. Change equals volatility. If you want to learn how to earn unlimited upside gains with no downside risk, principal's guaranteed. Once your gains are locked in, they become the new principal, and you can lock those gains in at any time. We've got access to the best indexes available. There's over 600 of them. I'll show you the 1, 5, 10-year results, and we have indexes that have returned up to 17% annual returns over the past 10 years. If you want information on this, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned for some more great information next week on the Your Personal Bank Show. And as long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
I'm Ference Toth, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. This is the golden era of fixed assets. Annuities and guaranteed lifetime income are paying the best rates in over 40 years. If you looked at annuities over 2 years ago, the numbers have increased significantly. If you own an annuity over 2 years old, the new products can not only pay your penalty to switch, but are often guaranteed to outperform your current product. For more info, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or 866-268-4422. That's yourpersonalbank.com.
Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information.
Concerned about market risk? I'm Ference Toth, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. The S&P 500 valuations are higher than at any time ever recorded in stock market history. This includes 1929 and 1999. We all know what happened afterwards. It wasn't pretty. Elevated valuations increase risk to the downside. Annuities and Your Personal Bank offer unlimited upside with no downside market risk. Your principal is guaranteed. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com to maximize returns, reduce market risk, increase liquidity, and reduce taxes.